All right. My clock says 11 a.m. That's the time it is where I am, broadcasting to you live from Nashville, Tennessee, Music City. Welcome to our webinar on SOLIDWORKS for FIRST Robotics. Today's topic is going to be assembly visualization. A little bit about myself. My name is David Brown. I'm a learning experience expert from working for SOLIDWORKS now for almost 5 years. I started using SOLIDWORKS just over 20 years ago, but prior to that, I spent a number of years in a variety of manufacturing environments, large-scale metal fabrication, custom cabinetry, and really, my love of building things, I would have to go back to my childhood with my father was an engineer, and he was always designing and building things, and I guess I've followed in his footsteps. So on this screen here, you see a couple images. I'm constantly making stuff, and there's a couple projects there that I have. I thought it'd be interesting rather than looking at a blank screen, but I will reference these images a little bit, but they're projects I did. The interesting thing I want to talk about the airplane is that I like RC airplanes. I like flying them. And that what you see there is a SolidWorks model of a plane that I have hanging on my wall over here that I brought into SolidWorks, modeled it up, combined it with a photograph that I took with my camera, combined that into Visualize, and created that image right there. And so that's what we're going to be talking a little bit about today. So as a builder all my life, when SolidWorks I was first introduced to, that changed everything for me. That was a game changer. And what I want to do today is share some of, I want to inspire you for one thing, and I want to share some of the techniques that I use in my projects for visualizing assemblies. Okay, next week we're going to have Nick on our team is going to give a talk on motion and simulation. All the webinars are 12 p.m. Eastern time, and recordings will be made available after the webinars, and we'll let you know how that goes. All right, so let's get into it. Today's
David,
agenda.
David, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. You said next week. It's actually this upcoming Thursday. It's
Oh,
in 2 days.
that's right. I'm
I just
sorry.
don't want
No,
people missing the webinar. So,
right. That's very good. Our whole thing wraps up here this week. So yes, thank you, Joe, for that.
okay,
Sorry,
on
folks.
to the next slide. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So in today's agenda, creating presentations and showing off your work is an important part of any team-based project like FIRST Robotics. In the webinars that you've already seen, you've seen a lot of things with creating parts. Last week, Fred talked about assembling things together and actually created some exploded views. Well, today I've got two main categories that I'm going to talk about. The first one is tips to organize assemblies. So we're going to talk about folders, display states, how I use exploded views, configurations, and really the whole point of this is going to kind of prepare the model for creating presentations and things like that. And that brings us to the second part. So what I'm going to show you is some tips and tricks that I use for getting screen captures from CAD to use in presentations. And then we're going to talk about SOLIDWORKS Visualize. So that's really where the meat of this is going to be. But this first part here, I think is really valuable, and you're going to see a lot of really cool things involved in this, okay? So with that being said, let's jump into SOLIDWORKS. So I'll bring that up. All right, so here I have this KitBot assembly that we've been working with throughout this webinar, and it's a robot designed for a specific purpose to take place in a certain arena and accomplish some specific tasks. And there's about 650 parts in this assembly, and if you look at the feature manager tree, if I just had those all listed here, not organized in any specific way, you can see that I have a very large, unwieldy, and difficult to manage list, right? So what I like to do is I'm just going to right click my feature manager tree and choose collapse items. I love to use folders. I love using folders to organize my assemblies because I can very easily break these up and just look at them in a way that groups and organizes the parts in different categories. Now, this is different than what you have with assemblies and sub-assemblies and things like that. Those also are a way to manage your assemblies, and good assembly modeling is using assembly or sub-assemblies rather. But folders give you a whole nother level of being able to visualize and organize things, right? So I've got the drivetrain and electronics in here. And what I can do with these is I can actually right-click that and click isolate, and I can see just those components. So it's very easy for me to take a look at those, and because they're kind of grouped together in that folder. And I'll exit isolate. One of the things I want to mention to you as we go through this is that you'll be watching me as I navigate the models. I will be using my mouse gestures. If I right click and hold my mouse down, I get this wheel. And what I like to do is I like to say, once I have the mouse gestures wheel open, I will move my mouse and swipe one of the commands. So you might hear me say, I'll swipe for a top view or swipe for an isometric view. Okay, I love mouse gestures. One of my favorite tools in SolidWorks. Use it constantly, right? So anyway, so you'll see me do that. All right, so what I have broken up in here is I've got, like the aluminum plates, aluminum box tube parts, and everything's kind of broken up into these different categories. One thing that you'll see if you look at any of my assemblies, especially when it has hardware, I will almost always put a hardware folder in there, because if you look at this, thing's got loaded with screws and bolts and nuts and washers and things like that. So I always like to group those in folders. Okay, in order to create a folder, I'm going to just show you this really quick. I'll take this aluminum plates one. I'm going to right click that. I'm just going to delete that. Right? That does not remove any of the components at all. So let's say I've got all these parts in here and I want to make them into a folder. I'll use Windows Select or Windows Shift and select that list. I'm purposely leaving out the bottom one, and I'll right click and choose Add to New Folder, and then I'll name it Aluminum Plates. And it's as easy as that. Now, you can create these folders and group things into these sections, and you may even add more things into the assembly. Well, those will just be added. All you have to do is drag and drop that and move that into your folder. You can even take something out of a folder and just drag and drop it and move it into another folder, so that you have complete control over how those folders work. Okay. So the next thing that you might notice on this list is as you are adding components into an assembly, you join them together using mates, and Fred talked about that last week. And there's two main areas where these mates are organized. One is in the mates folder at the bottom of the feature manager tree, and that is just loaded with one mate after another, right? And so what I like to do, the other thing that also takes place is each part, as you add mates to it, will have its own folder of mates that just correspond to that individual part. So that's another way you can organize these. But sometimes what I will do is, if I have mates in my assembly that are key mates or specific mates, I will create a key mates folder, right? And that's what I've got here. So in here, I've got the gear mates. I've got this wheel clearance mate here. If I move these wheels, okay, see, these are all geared together. But the way I have these mated in this assembly is I've got the wheels, which there are 3 of them here. There's a main center one that drives them all. And then there's some pulleys. Those are all mated together. And then I have this single mate that is this wheel clearance mate here. And with that one mate, I can position all of those wheels and everything together and position that exactly where I want to by controlling that single mate. So that's something that I'll use all the time, right? So that's an easy way to, and all you have to do is create the folder for the mates, and then just find the mate, drag and drop it. And if you notice, I've named them. I've given these mates special names so that I can easily identify them. So that's another great way that you can use to organize your assemblies. Okay, what I'm trying to do here is minimize that. All right, the next thing I want to talk about are these other things down here. Now, these are linear patterns or mirror patterns within the assembly. What I like to do is I like to give these names. All these are just folders of the patterned features when you create those. So another tip to use is to go ahead and give those a meaningful name. Okay? All right, so that's really what I want to talk about with folders. A lot of great things that you can do with that. The other thing that was mentioned a few weeks ago, I believe Joe mentioned this. He talked about the design library, and I'll just show you that a little bit. What I've done here with the robot car I showed you a little bit ago, when I created that, and what you're going to find on a project like this, you're going to create a lot of components that you will make, that you will 3D print. A lot of them will be like, for example, these aluminum box parts. You'll buy lengths of that and cut it up, right? Or you'll buy the aluminum plates or material, and then you will cut those up with a laser cutter, or the polycarbonate where you get that in a big sheet and then cut them up and things like that. But there's a lot of components that you will get that you will purchase, like these wheels, you would purchase those, or the electronics things, you would purchase those. But when you go to assemble those and create your assembly, you want a model of those. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to create a library of components, like that little car I showed you, where I purchased a bunch of parts, like the battery. I made a model of that, and the motor controller board, different circuit boards and things like that. So now I have a library of those, and I keep those in my design library so that I can use those in multiple different kind of projects and things like that. All these are a link to a folder on your hard drive, and that's all that they are. And you simply click this button up here, add file location, and browse to that folder, and you can have access to those, and you just simply drag and drop those things right in there. Okay. All right, I think we're doing really well. So the next thing I want to talk about, that's folders. Okay, that's the folders section of this. I'm going to go ahead and on the property manager here, I've got this button called Configuration Manager. Now this is really cool. Oops, sorry about that. Didn't mean to close that. This is really cool. I like all of this. Now, configurations are, like this robot here. I've only got one configuration. I don't have a configuration that has an arm or laser beams or, things like that. It's just this. So I don't need to have configurations. But at the bottom of this list is display states. And display states are really cool. So what I can do with these is, for example, I can, almost similar to folders, but I'll show you a difference. For example, I have a display state that just shows the drivetrain, for example. All right, so that's my drivetrain. Now I'm going to go back over to the feature manager tree. Now notice this. There's a lot of grayed out things and hidden things in here, but it goes across all of the folders. Okay, if I do the top frame assembly, for example, I can just visualize that section of it, right? So again, if I look at this, notice that there are some, it takes parts from all of the folders. All right, so that's really cool. I like to use display states for this purpose. It gives you a little bit different control and a different level of being able to visualize your assemblies. Now check this one out here. I've got this back frame over here. I'm going to swipe for an isometric view. Up underneath the configuration, I do have some derived configurations here. What I have is I've got some exploded views in here, right? So I have the back frame, I have the front frame. I'll show you the exploded views here in a second. Now, when I look at the front frame, right, and I double click and activate that exploded view, it's kind of not quite in the position that I want it to be in. So what I did, if I hit my space bar, it brings up my view orientation dialog, and there's a lot of things I can do with this. But if I click this little button here, I can add a new view, which I've done already, and I named it Front Frame ISO. So when I click that, it flips that around for me. So what I'm doing here is I'm getting ready to take a picture of this because I want to put this into my presentation. Now here's the trick, all right? So on the heads-up display, there's this apply scene drop down. If I click on that, I choose plain white, and that's what I have almost all the time. And I don't have shadows on, if you notice. What this allows me to do is I can go over to my Windows uh, and in my search, and I can search for the Windows snipping tool. And I can grab that and I can click new, right? And I can actually just take a screen capture. Maybe you know how to do that, maybe not. I don't know. But this is just a Windows thing. There's a lot of other programs that allow you to do that. And then I could just save that and bring that into a PowerPoint and watch. I'll show you how I do that in a second. So I've got the front frame. Okay. I'll minimize this. I'll select the back frame, swipe for an isometric view, and I'll take a look at that one, and I would activate that, take a screen capture, and the back frame, take a screen capture of that, right? And so then what I would do is I would come into my PowerPoint now. Let me get that back up here. Not sure why it's not showing up. There we go. And I could bring that into PowerPoint and create some step-by-step instructions and things like that. I've got a lot of power with that. Now, the way this works is I have the white background in my SOLIDWORKS and I have a white background in my PowerPoint. But what if I don't have a white background? Then what I get is I get the background of that image. And that's what you get when you get a screen capture, right? So this looks fantastic. And this looks pretty good, okay? All right, so what we're gonna do next, that's how I create images for screen captures, for presentations, training manuals, and things like that. Assembly instructions. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this right inside SOLIDWORKS. We're going to take things to the next level, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to take one of these wheels, and I'm going to show you how to prepare that for Visualize to create a photorealistic image in Visualize that I can use in my PowerPoints. But guess what? It doesn't matter what the background is because there will be no background, all right? So if you think about it, if I had a bunch of different objects, I could pile them all on top of each other and there would be no background that I have to worry about. It's just the model in a photorealistic situation, okay? So right at this point, I'm going to go back into SolidWorks here, and I'll go back into this here a little bit.
David,
And yes, sir.
before we start Visualize, there is only one display state question. Maybe we
Yep.
want to get it before you go over to
Yes.
Visualize.
Yes. Let's do that.
Okay, does display state configure the assembly automatically, or do we need to make adjustments beforehand to achieve that result? For example,
Here,
do we need to specify that this is a drivetrain and this is an AL plate as shown in the example?
I'm glad you asked that. All the display state is it's just showing the display state of each of the components. So, for example, let's say I have this top frame assembly. And I want to show pretty much the same thing, but I don't want to show the polycarbonate pieces or this gaff tape back here, okay? So I'll create a new display state. I just right click down here, select add display state, and I'll slow click on there so I can access that. And I'll do top frame, I'll give it a name, no poly for polycarbonate, right? Now I'll move my mouse over here and I will press my tab key and hide these pieces, right? And I will probably rotate, I'll just look at the side view of that. I'll just go ahead and do that way, right? Just hide all those. Those are those little connectors, and I would go through and I would hide the hardware as well. But that's all I'm doing, right? Is doing that. So now I've got the top frame with no poly, and I've got the top frame full assembly. So that's all I'm doing with that. There's a lot of different ways that you can take this, and you can take each individual component, for example, and you could access this and you could make it transparent, for example. So now I've got that piece there is transparent. That also is part of the display state. So you can take and you can make any of these display states in here to be wireframe, hidden lines, visible, anything that you select in here for individual components, colors, all of that kind of stuff can be captured in the display state. So that's a great question. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go return to this. I'm actually going to go back to this here, and I'll do the full robot again. I'll get that activated, that display state. What if I don't want a display state? Well, I can just right-click and just delete the display state. It has nothing to do with the components. They're all still there. It's just the display state is gone. The same thing takes place in configurations. Now, if you were actually wanting to put any of this stuff on drawings, which I'm not going to talk about drawings today, but display states as well as configurations can be leveraged in drawings. So if you wanted to do drawings of that, you can also have specific display states. I tell you, the amount of stuff that you can do with display states and configurations is amazing. Anything that you can imagine how you want this to appear, you can do that with those. I really use those quite a bit. All right, so what we're going to do right now is I'm going to take and I'm going to get this little wheel assembly down here. I'm going to open that in its own window. Okay, and we are going to begin to transition out of SOLIDWORKS and into Visualize. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come up to my window here, and I'm going to close my main assembly. I don't need to save it. All right, so here's what I've got, right? Now we're just going to focus on this wheel, and I'm going to do this really quick. What we have here is I've got two versions of this, or I'm sorry, configurations. I have a simplified configuration, and I have a default configuration. The default configuration has two exploded views set up in it, one for the left side and one for the other side. All right. Notice what's going on here is I've got, look at those threads in there. Wow, those are really cool. Now I want those to be able to be seen when I take my photograph of it, and that's what I'll be doing here. But before I do that, I want to go back to this. I'm just going to show you this really quick, a little trick about configurations. Now what I have active is I have the simplified configuration of this wheel assembly. Active right now. And when I look at the hardware folder, all of those 12 screws, 6 on one side and 6 on the other, show a simplified, that's in these parentheses is the configuration name, show the simplified version of that. If I activate the default configuration and I look at the hardware, it shows the default configuration of those. What's going on here? I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to show you this. Okay, now like I mentioned before, when you create projects for like FIRST Robotics and other things like that, you're going to have a combination of things that you will purchase from manufacturers, and in some cases, those manufacturers will provide you with CAD files of their products. That is the case here with this screw, right? So when I look at this, I can see an imported feature here. What I did, I created a simplified version of that. And all I did was I added this boss extrude that covered up the threads, put a chamfer at the end of it, and added a cosmetic thread that makes it look like it has threads. But what's nice about this is that when I have the simplified version, and I'm going to close this now, I don't need to save that. When I have this simplified version in my SOLIDWORKS assembly, You don't see those screws, and I don't want SOLIDWORKS in a large assembly to have to calculate and draw all of those threads when I don't even need to see them, right? But I want to see them in this exploded view, okay? So what I'm going to do at this point is I've got my exploded view that I want to bring in to SOLIDWORKS Visualize and take a picture of it. All right. So what I have here is, if you notice, there's already some appearances applied. So over here, and I always do this in my SolidWorks, is I will come over here and I will choose an appearance and I will apply it to all the components. All right. And there's a reason why I do that, because when you bring this into Visualize, I'm preparing it for Visualize, I want it to be grouped by appearances. It makes my Visualize experience go much smoother if things are already done. See, there's like 20 some components in this tiny little assembly. However, there's only about 5 or 6 appearances applied to it. All right, so that is our state. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to, with this configuration open, and that's important, I'm going to save it. I'm going to save that guy. All right, so that's exactly how I want that. Now I'm going to close SolidWorks, and I'm back in my PowerPoint, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up SolidWorks Visualize, and we're going to import this. When you save a SolidWorks part or assembly, whatever configuration is open when you save it, that's the configuration that will be open when you open it up again. That's the key part here. So what I'm going to show you before I jump into Visualize is this next slide here. This is the wheel. This is the company where I get that wheel from. All right. And so I have that wheel in my assembly. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this information here to paint the wheel that color. So that way in my model, in my Visualize, image that I'm going to create, it's going to look like pretty close to what I've got here, what they've given me. All right. So, and you can see that this wheel actually is, you can purchase it with blue, black, white or gray, etc. Right. I like the light gray one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to jump into Visualize. All right. Love it. Love Visualize. Visualize is a virtual photo studio. Photography is the key word here. Back in the day, we would create a product, we would make a prototype of it, we would give that to a photographer, and that person would take that and put it into an environment, add some lights to the environment, set up a camera, and take some pictures. That's exactly the steps that we're going to take in SolidWorks Visualize. All right, and as you can see, I've got a couple projects there and things that I've been working on for this. And by the way, all the images in my PowerPoint are from Visualize. I'm going to choose File and Open, and I'm going to select my file. Oh, look at that. It's expanded. It's already exploded the way I want to. So I'm going to bring this and I'm going to open that up in Visualize. Give it a chance here. It asks me for some import settings. You have a couple options. A component part body will give me a very large tree. I don't want that. I just want the 5 or 6 appearances for me to manage, all right? Because I've already got that defined mostly. And I'll just leave everything the way it is and I'll click OK. Now we are looking at Visualize. Oh, that's brilliant. Now, one thing I'm going to say right off the bat is Visualize, the developers for Visualize, know what they're doing when they are creating a virtual photo studio. I am a photographer. I love photography. And so I approach this program as a photographer. And there's something that I know about product photography is that light gray background. That is product photography 101. All right. So they've done a really good job. The environment that they give us to start with is really good, although I think it's a little bit dim. I would like to turn up the lights a little bit. But Before I do that, I want to show you over on the right-hand side, there are 4 main tabs and a 5th one that is a stack of library books. We're going to go right down these tabs. The very first tab is the model tab, right? So I can expand this and I can see my tree and check this out. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parts. If I click on part number 4, it is highlighting all of the screws, right? So that's brilliant. That's what I want. Now notice here, I could have actually created this explode in Visualize itself, and you can transfer things, but I would have to import it a little bit different. So this is really an easy way of doing things here that I'm showing you because of our time today. Okay, so that's what we've got going on here, and that's all I'm going to talk about with this. With Visualize, there's tons of different features and tweaks that you can do and that kind of stuff. I've got my exploded view the way I want it, so I'm pretty happy with that, right? So I'm going to move on. So now that's what that represents, is me bringing this model into my environment. So the next thing I can do is I'm going to click on this little paint bucket here, and notice what I've got. I've got a couple things going on. These are the 5, it looks like, different materials that it brought in from SOLIDWORKS, okay? Now, if we look at this a little bit, I don't really care for that brushed steel that is on that hex bushing, that hex spacer there. So I'm gonna grab one from Visualize. So I'm gonna go over to the library over here, and I'm gonna scroll down a little bit. I'm gonna click on metal and scroll down a little bit more on that. I'm gonna click on steel, and I like this polished steel here. I'm gonna click and drag that onto my model, onto that one piece, and there it is. I like that better. I like that polished steel a little bit better. I'm happy with that. So the rest of the things I'm pretty happy with. Okay, but let's take a look at this thing up at the top here. If I go back to my tab here, I've got this color, and what I really want is I want that to be rubber. So I'm going to go back to my library here, and I'm going to click on rubber, find rubber down here. It's after P, I guess. There's rubber, and I'm going to take matte rubber, and I'm going to click and drag that and put it on the wheel. Okay, so that'll give it a little bit of texture, makes it look a bit cooler, but I don't want black, I want the gray, right? So I'm going to go over here to the paint again, and I'm going to click on matte rubber, and I can see there's tons of different things, texture mapping, and things like that. There's this funny little name down here called albedo. That's just the color. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I am going to take, and on the left, I've got multiple screens, monitors here, and on the left screen off to my side, I have that picture that I showed you of the manufacturer. Here it is right here. So I just got that over there. I'll take that off to the side, and I'm going to click on that color aspect, and I'm going to pick up this little eyedropper, and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm going to drag. And notice what I can do. I can drag it on any place on my screen or any other screen, right? And I'm going to click, and I'm going to actually drag that over and release my mouse on a section of that wheel from the picture off the manufacturer's website. That is amazing. I love that, right? That is so cool. All right, so I am done painting my model. I've brought it into the environment, I've made some adjustments to the paint and things like that. Now I'm going to go into make some adjustments to the environment, right? And we've got a couple goofy things going on here. Notice this, there's a gray Studio Soft gray thing here. Notice the word in the category there, it's called backplate. Right? If you remember that picture I showed you on the front of this of the airplane flying in the sunset, well, that sunset was a picture that I took with my camera that I brought into Visualize as a backplate, right? That's separate from the environment. In fact, I don't want that backplate, so I'm going to click on it and I'm going to delete it. So that way all I have is this environment. Now look at this thing here. What in the world is that kind of image, right? Well, I'll tell you what this is. I'm going to zoom out with my mouse. I'm going to zoom way out. Now, keep in mind this. This wheel is 6 inches in diameter, right? So I'm going to scroll way out here. Look at that. This is a sphere. So this image up here is a spherical image. Now, I mentioned earlier that I wish that it was a little bit brighter. Most people would come down and they would just start adjusting this brightness. But let's skip that and let's go down to these boxes down here where, notice this, I have this rotation. Watch what happens. Look at, that's those 3 2 small and 1 large white blotches on the top. Well, this image wrapped around this sphere with the model in the very center of it that is what's producing the light. So if I look at this image, there's light coming up from the bottom, there's light coming down from the top by these 3 lights here. However, look at this size thing. Size. Radius of the environment, 25 meters. You know what that is? That's 82 feet. That would be the same thing as me taking this 6-inch wheel, putting it on the sidewalk, climbing to the top of an 8-story building, putting some lights up there, and then saying, "Hey, take the picture." Well, I wouldn't do that as a photographer. Well, so if I want to lighten up this environment, I want to brighten it up a little bit. I'm going to move my lights closer to the subject. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click in this box and I'm going to change it to 10. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to my model here. Oops, going the wrong way. Let's go back this way. All right, keep zooming, keep zooming. I'm just zooming with my wheel, my mouse wheel. All right, so that's a little bit brighter. I'm going to move them a little bit closer. I'm going to click in that box and I'm going to make it 5 meters, right? And that brightens that up a little bit. I'm moving the lights closer to my thing. Now, the picture that I want to take of this, I don't want any shadows in it because if you remember, I'm looking for a clear background, no background. All I care about with this environment is the lights, right? The light of it. So down here, I've got this ground shadow catcher. I'm going to turn that off. So I don't have that. So, all right. So what I've done is I've done the first 3 tabs. I brought this into my environment. I made some adjustments to the appearances and I've positioned the lights. Now it's time to set up the camera. So on here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my photography hat on and I'm going to reach into my camera bag and I'm going to pick out a lens. Notice down here, there's a lens down here. There's perspective and focal length. Notice if I drag this bar, they're connected to each other, right? Now, as a photographer, I don't care about perspective because perspective comes from the lens that you choose. What I'm going to do here is so I go right straight for this focal length. I'm going to click in that box and I'm going to put in 50. I've just reached into my camera bag and picked out a 50 millimeter lens. Now, why did I choose a 50 millimeter lens? Why didn't I choose a 35 millimeter or a 28 millimeter? That would be the same thing as if I was taking a picture of a landscape, right? Those are called wide angle lenses when you get below 50. When you get above 50, you're talking about zoom lenses or telephoto lenses. Well, what's this 50 thing? 50 is the human eye. So if you want to take a picture of something that is a natural looking photograph, you want to choose a 50 millimeter focal length. And that's exactly what I want to do with this. Now, as I scroll my mouse in, I'm basically moving closer to my subject with my camera. All right. So I'm ready now. I'm going to go ahead. I've got everything set up. I'm going to take a picture. So I click here and I activate the render wizard and it walks me through what type of image I want. I just want a standard image. Next, here's the big one right here. You want PNG for the format, and you want to activate alpha channel. That just sounds awesome. It really means no background, okay? Alpha channel, I want to include the alpha channel that deals with the background stuff. So I want to click next. I want a width of 1920 by 1080. That is HD. That's the same aspect ratio of my TV, my phone, my monitors and all that kind of stuff. I click next. This gives me my render quality. I want high quality. Render passes 500. I find that to be totally suitable for standard product photography. I want the enable denoiser. What that does is that is also another photography term. And I always have that on, gives you a nicer, cleaner image and things like that. I'm going to click next, and I'm going to give a title to this, and I'm going to just call it Explode 2 or 1 or whatever it was. Okay, doesn't matter. Then I'm click render, and it will render the image at this point. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get out of Visualize. That's the whole thing with Visualize. And we're going to come into back into my PowerPoint. Okay, we're going to talk about a few things here. So once I get that image done, I can bring it into my PowerPoint, and I don't have to worry about a background or anything like that. I can do whatever it is that you need to communicate. These are the two main things that I use. And you can see with Visualize, you can get really quickly some great photos that are just product photography, website ready, all that kind of stuff. It's amazing what you can do with Visualize. Let's take that a little bit further. So I've got a couple other images that I can show you. Here's one where I took a picture of this, and it's like I climbed in the robot with my camera and took a picture. You can even see the reflection of that relay box on the inside um, of the polycarbonate there, and you can see reflections and different things on the metal and whatnot. That looks real. That looks amazingly real. Something else I did was I actually got a photograph of the arena that this robot participates in, and I brought that in as a backplate into Visualize, combined it with the model. I went through and I chose an environment that gave me the lighting that was closest to this. You can't tell that that's not a model next to that station right there. You can even see the shadows below the model on the carpet. How in the world does it do that? That is amazing. And that is Visualize. Okay, I love it. Love doing that stuff. It combines, SolidWorks was a game changer for me. As you can tell, maybe not, I'm passionate about this stuff. I love working with SolidWorks, and it is the tools to use, and it is just absolutely amazing. Any questions? That's my webinar.
There have been a couple of questions along the way, David. Very well done, but I was able to keep up with them and answer them. There was one question asked, how did you get the picture? That would mean going back through many 15 minutes or so of the presentation. So for that, I recommend watching the recording. There are many, many good tips and many, many good things in here. So the recording will help you learn it in more depth.
Very good.
There are no other open questions at this time.
Okay. Awesome. Well, with that, we've got a lot of resources on SolidWorks training, my SolidWorks training, practice problems for your to get ready for your CSWA, classroom curriculum. We've got a lot of stuff on there for projects that you can do to practice. I always tell my students, and I practice this myself, I model the world around me. I look at objects and I go, oh, that'd be a cool model. I'd like I'd like to make a model of that. And so I recommend to students to take things apart. You learn how things go together. You learn assemblies that way. When you take things apart, you're analyzing all the features and how they work together. And at the end, you build libraries of parts and models and things that you have. And that's a great thing to do. So I always recommend doing that. And I combine my hobbies and things like that with all of this as well. Okay,
David,
the last thing. Oh,
before we do this slide, we did have a good question come in.
okay.
Can you render videos? Specifically, can you render explode and collapse videos? You probably don't have time to show it, but if you have time to answer that, that would be great.
I do. Actually, if you don't mind, and we got a couple minutes, I'll show you a few things that we can do. And I've got a bunch of things here. And here's one, as a matter of fact. I'll just double click on this video right here. This video is a robot arm. It's a robot work cell. And what I did is it's a lathe. It's a pick and place operation that you would see. A FANUC robot is what that is. And what I did is I used Make controller to create the animation, and then I brought that into motion study in SolidWorks, exported that out and brought that into Visualize, and then further animated the camera and things like that. So short answer is yes, you can do amazing videos and things like that with SolidWorks Visualize. And it's
Perfect.
just,
Thank you.
it's awesome. Yeah. Okay. Bunch of other things I've done in the past. I modeled up my guitar. Here's a cool image. We remodeled our kitchen, and we didn't like the chandelier, but I thought, hey, that'd be a cool model. So I modeled it up in SolidWorks, and notice the light bulbs. I made the light bulbs look like that in Visualize, and it looks like they're glowing. So that's a lot of cool things that you can do. But you can see there's tons of stuff that I have in here, and I really enjoy working with Visualize. Okay, any other questions?
No, but I'm just going to add one more thing since you have my SolidWorks up on the screen. We have a
Yep,
visualized learning path, and in that learning path, we have topics such as basics of animation, 360-degree spins and rotation
yep,
animations, and camera animations. So you might be
yep,
able to get some more details about how to create those styles of animations from our My SolidWorks learning path on SolidWorks Visualize.
absolutely.
Okay, I think we're ready for next slide. We're all set with questions.
Okay, FIRST Robotics resources. Here's a link to some of that stuff. A lot of different parts and things like that that you can access. And then, of course, with this 6-part webinar series, you've got access to CSWA. I highly encourage you to pursue those certifications, get the certifications, and it's a great foundation for SolidWorks. And you have to attend all 6 webinars and things like that, and we'll reach out to those who qualify in the weeks after the webinars end. And next week or I'm sorry, not next week, 2 days from now, August 21st, Motion and Simulation by Nick. He's going to show you some amazing stuff that you can do with SolidWorks and all of that. Okay. And that ends the video or my webinar, and I will leave you with this image as I fly my RC airplane into the sunset. I thank you. It has been an honor to be with you today. I love sharing this stuff, and I wish you all the best of luck in your learning and SolidWorks endeavors, and best of luck to you. Thank you so much, everybody, and you have all a great day.
Well done, David. Thank you.